The boardroom froze when the CEO stormed in, holding a parenting flyer instead of a business report. Cameras clicked. No one understood why Daniel Carter, New York's most feared executive, was standing there with glitter on his suit and a toddler's sticker on his tie. What they didn't know was that a single wrong turn that morning into a Mom and Me class was about to rewrite everything he thought he knew about success, love, and family. And if stories like this remind you that sometimes the biggest miracles come from the smallest mistakes, don't forget to tap like, share, and tell us in the comments. What was a wrong turn that changed your life? New York wore autumn like a quiet confession that morning. Crisp air, amber leaves swirling across Madison Avenue, the city rushing toward another workday. Inside a sleek black town car, Daniel Carter loosened his tie for the third time and checked his watch. He wasn't late. He never was. But something about this morning felt off. Maybe it was the look on his daughter's face when he dropped her at school. The polite nod instead of a hug. The silence that had stretched between them for months. Lily was only 6, but since Julia's death 2 years ago, she'd built a small fortress of quiet around her world, and Daniel had no map to enter it. His assistant had scheduled a seminar called Leadership for Modern Fathers at a local community center. Might help you understand her better, she'd said. Daniel had hesitated. He could manage hundreds of employees, billion-dollar contracts, and crisis meetings that lasted until dawn. But he couldn't manage bedtime stories without feeling like an imposter. So he went. Maybe, he told himself, sitting among a few fathers would make him less of a stranger to his own child. The glass doors of the Maplewood Learning Center opened with a cheerful jingle, the scent of coffee and baby powder greeting him. He straightened his jacket, smoothed his hair, and followed the signs to Room 204, Mom and Me Emotional Parenting. The title barely registered. He was reading an email while pushing the door open. Laughter and the faint squeak of rubber toys filled the air. 20 women turned toward him, some with babies on their laps, others with toddlers drawing on mats. Daniel froze. The room went still for a beat, then rippled with muffled giggles. A blonde woman whispered, "Wrong class, honey?" He blinked at the pastel posters on the wall. Gentle parenting works, and understanding your child's feelings, and realized he'd been ambushed by a clerical error. His assistant must have clicked the wrong link. He should have left right then. But before he could retreat, a soft voice from the front called, "You're welcome to stay if you like." It belonged to a woman with auburn hair pulled into a loose bun, her cardigan sleeves slightly rolled, a small brass bell resting on the table beside her. Emma Lewis. Her name tag read Facilitator. She smiled, not mocking, just open. "Parenting isn't exclusive," she said gently. "We can all learn from each other." Something in her tone, steady, unassuming, disarmed him. He murmured, "I think I'm in the wrong room." She nodded. "Maybe, or maybe you're exactly where you need to be." The mothers chuckled, but the tension melted. Daniel exhaled, half smiling despite himself, and took a seat at the back. Emma resumed the session, speaking about emotional safety, about how children withdraw when they feel unseen. Her words weren't academic. They carried quiet grief, as though she knew the territory intimately. Daniel half listened, half watched the small interactions in the room. The tenderness, the patience, and felt an ache of envy. When the group shared their challenges, a young mother said her son stopped talking after his father left. Daniel's throat tightened. He thought of Lily's silence, of Julia's piano gathering dust. He almost stood to leave again, unwilling to feel this exposed, when Emma's gaze met his. She wasn't pitying him. She simply saw him. "Sometimes," she said, "our children don't need answers. They need to know we're listening, even to their silence." That single line rooted him to his chair. By the end of the hour, Daniel had scribbled notes he didn't understand, phrases like mirror play and safe touch. When the class dispersed, he stayed behind, unsure why. Emma was stacking chairs, humming faintly. Up close, he noticed the fine lines around her eyes, the tired grace of someone who gave more than she received. "You handled that well," she said, glancing at him. "Most men would have bolted." He smiled awkwardly. "I still might." She laughed softly. "Then at least you learned something before you go." As he left, he caught a fragment of her humming, a tune that tugged at memory, but he couldn't place. Outside, the city was loud again, impatient. Yet Daniel walked slower than usual. For the first time in 2 years, he wasn't thinking about stock prices or quarterly reports. He was thinking about a small brass bell, a woman's steady voice, and his daughter's silent eyes. That night, when he tucked Lily into bed, she didn't speak. But when he reached to smooth her blanket, she didn't pull away either. It was almost nothing. Except for Daniel, it felt like a door had opened a crack. He didn't know that one mistaken turn into the wrong classroom had already changed the course of his life. The following week, Daniel returned to the Maplewood Center. Not out of obligation, but because something in him had shifted. The wrong class no longer felt wrong. He arrived in jeans this time, no briefcase, no Bluetooth in his ear. When he entered, the mothers smiled in quiet recognition, and Emma looked genuinely surprised. "Back again?" she teased, handing him a clipboard. "I'm a slow learner," he said. "Besides, I think my daughter deserves a better teacher than I've been." She smiled softly. "Then let's start there." The day's exercise was called mirror drawing. Parents sat facing their children, each holding a marker, drawing on transparent sheets pressed together. The rule: no talking, only eye contact. When Emma explained that emotions travel faster through presence than through words, Daniel felt skeptical. But when Lily sat before him, small, cautious, eyes flicking up to meet his, he felt the rest of the room dissolve. She drew a crooked heart. He mirrored it clumsily. She frowned. He tried again, slower this time, letting her lead. The tension broke when she giggled, a sound he hadn't heard in months. He froze, afraid to move, afraid to lose the moment. Emma caught his eye from across the room, nodding as if to say, "That's it. Stay there." After class, Emma showed Daniel a simpler version of the exercise he could use at home. "It's not about being perfect," she said. "It's about letting her know you're present." He hesitated. "I've spent my whole life fixing things. When something's broken, I make it work again. But with her, I don't even know where to start." Emma's expression softened. "Maybe stop trying to fix her. Just be with her where she is." The words landed heavy, true. He thanked her, but his voice caught halfway. Over the next few sessions, Daniel became a familiar sight. Always in the back row, always listening. Sometimes taking notes like a man studying a foreign language. He learned about co-regulation, about how children borrow calm from their parents' nervous systems. He'd never thought about emotions as something transferable, like warmth from a lamp. At home, he tried it. Lowering his voice, kneeling to Lily's level, matching her breathing when she grew restless. It wasn't magic, but slowly she began responding. One night, she handed him her stuffed rabbit before bed, her silent gesture of trust. Meanwhile, Emma found herself watching him more than she meant to. The polished CEO who'd walked in that first morning was gone, replaced by a man genuinely trying. It stirred something long dormant in her. 2 years ago, she had left the children's hospital after losing a young patient she couldn't save. His parents had blamed her for not doing enough, and she'd believed them. Since then, she'd avoided close attachments, fearing she might hurt someone again. But Daniel's raw sincerity, his awkwardness, his quiet determination, began to break through the walls she'd built. One evening, as rain drummed against the classroom windows, Emma introduced a new tool, a small Tibetan singing bowl. "Sound connects breath and attention," she explained. "We'll practice matching rhythms with our children. When the bowl hums, you breathe with them." She handed Daniel the mallet. The metallic note that followed trembled in the air. Too sharp. Too quick. Lily startled, covering her ears. Daniel's heart clenched. He knelt instantly beside her. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Daddy's still learning." The room fell silent except for the fading echo of the bowl. Emma's eyes glistened. It was the first time he had spoken to his daughter, not as a father issuing comfort, but as a man admitting fault. That humility changed the atmosphere. Lily reached for his hand, forgiving without words. After class, when everyone had gone, Emma lingered by the window. "You did well," she said quietly. "Most parents freeze when they trigger a child's fear. You reached out instead." Daniel smiled faintly. "I'm used to making noise. Maybe it's time I learn harmony." She laughed softly at his metaphor, but something unspoken passed between them. A mutual recognition of healing. He asked if she'd consider visiting their home for private sessions. "Lily responds to you," he said, "and I think I do too." Emma hesitated. "I don't usually do home visits anymore. Just a few sessions," he pressed gently. "You'd be helping both of us." That night, she sat in her car outside the center long after he'd left, staring at the raindrops sliding down the windshield. For the first time in years, she felt something stir beneath the layer of guilt, a fragile spark of hope. She whispered to herself, "Maybe it's time." For Daniel, driving home under the same rain, the city lights blurred into something softer. The brass bell on Emma's table still echoed faintly in his memory. He didn't know why, but every time it rang, the noise inside him quieted. The first time Emma stepped into Daniel's penthouse, she paused at the threshold. It was beautiful, too beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, minimalist furniture, everything arranged with surgical precision. But beneath the polish was a stillness so complete it felt sterile. No drawings taped to the fridge, no stray toys on the floor. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Lily peeked from behind her father's leg, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Emma smiled gently. "Hi, sweetheart. May I come in?" Lily nodded, barely. Daniel offered coffee as if this were another board meeting. "You don't have to," Emma began, but he was already moving toward the kitchen. Old habits, she thought. Control as comfort. When he returned, she was sitting cross-legged on the rug with Lily, unpacking markers and paper. "We're going to draw bridges today," she said. "Bridges?" Daniel asked. "Why bridges?" Emma's eyes softened. "Because bridges connect two places that want to meet." Lily began to draw slowly. Thin arches, rivers underneath, and on one side a small figure holding a balloon. Daniel watched silently from the couch, his hands clasped. Emma leaned closer to the child. "Who's this on the other side of the bridge?" she asked softly. Lily pointed to the far bank, a taller figure, head bowed. "Daddy," she whispered, almost inaudible. Emma's throat tightened. When the session ended, she folded the paper carefully and handed it to Daniel. "This is her map," she said. "She's showing you the distance." He looked at it as though holding evidence of a crime he couldn't name. "The night my wife died," he said suddenly, "I was in a board meeting arguing over stock projections. The call came, and by the time I reached the hospital," his voice fractured, "I wasn't there. I missed the last 5 minutes of her life." Emma sat quietly, letting the silence hold him. "You can't go back to that moment," she said softly. "But you can build the bridge forward." He nodded, unable to speak. When she left that evening, the city lights shimmered below, and she found herself humming without realizing it. An old melody, half forgotten. The next session took place on a Sunday afternoon. The penthouse looked warmer now. Lily's drawings taped near the kitchen, a vase of wildflowers on the counter. Emma noticed a framed photograph of Julia, the late wife. She was beautiful. Dark hair, kind eyes, fingers resting on a piano key mid-note. "She was a musician?" Emma asked. Daniel nodded. Classical pianist. She taught part-time at Juilliard. Music was everything to her. Emma's hand trembled slightly. I know, she said softly before she could stop herself. Daniel frowned. You knew Julia? She hesitated, then exhaled. Yes, I was one of her students, years ago. She helped me get my scholarship. She changed my life. The confession hung in the air like a delicate fracture. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. The coincidence felt too sharp, too intimate. So you came here because of her? He asked quietly. Because you felt sorry for us? His tone wasn't cruel, but defensive. The voice of a man who'd been blindsided before. Emma shook her head. No, I didn't even know she was your wife until I saw that photo. I came because of Lily. Because she needs someone who understands her silence. Daniel looked away, jaw tight. Or maybe because you need to atone for something. The words cut deeper than he meant. Emma froze, pain flickering across her face. Maybe I do, she whispered. But not like this. She gathered her things with trembling hands. I think it's best if I step back for now. When the door closed behind her, the apartment felt colder than before. Daniel stood alone in the echoing space, the child's drawing of a bridge still on the table. He looked at the two stick figures reaching for each other and felt the weight of his own distance, not just from Emma, but from everyone he had ever cared about. That night, Lily crept into his study, barefoot and silent. She climbed into his lap and pressed the drawing into his hands. Fix it, she whispered. It was the first full sentence she'd spoken in months. His breath caught, but before he could respond, she slid off and padded back to her room, leaving him with the sound of her small footsteps fading into the dark. Daniel stared at the bridge again. The ink smudged from her tiny fingers. Outside, the city hummed like a machine that never slept. But for the first time, he didn't feel like part of it. Somewhere across town, Emma sat alone at her piano, her fingers tracing Julia's old melody, Bridge of Light. The same tune Daniel had heard her hum that first day. The invisible connection between them, between griefs that mirrored each other, had always been there. He just hadn't seen it yet. The storm rolled in without warning. Sheets of rain lashing against the glass walls of Daniel's office, as if the city itself had decided to weep. He sat alone at the head of the long conference table, a proposal open on the screen before him, words blurring into nothing. The company was thriving, investors satisfied, deadlines met. Yet every metric of success only amplified the emptiness inside. It had been 3 weeks since Emma left. 3 weeks since Lily had spoken that single command, fix it. He had tried calling Emma once, but she didn't answer. Maybe she was right to stay away. Maybe some bridges couldn't hold the weight of 2 damaged people. As thunder rolled, his phone buzzed. It was Lily's school. The voice on the other end trembled. Mr. Carter, your daughter's running a high fever. She's inconsolable. She keeps crying for someone named Emma. The chair screeched as he stood. I'm on my way. He barely remembered the drive. The streets were slick. Traffic lights bleeding red across his windshield. Memories flashed. Julia's accident, the phone call, the same helpless rush. Not again, he thought. Not again. When he arrived at the school, the nurse met him in the hallway. She won't calm down, she said. She's shaking, hiding under the piano in the music room. Daniel's heart stopped. The piano. He pushed open the door, and there she was, small, pale, curled beneath the instrument that once belonged to her mother's world. Lily, he whispered, kneeling beside her. She looked up, eyes glazed with fever and fear. Emma, she sobbed. I want Emma. Daniel swallowed hard. I know, sweetheart. I'm trying. Then, behind him, a familiar voice answered softly. You already did. He turned. Emma stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, her hair clinging to her face. She had come as soon as the school called her too. For a moment, they just stared at each other. the distance between them collapsing under the weight of worry. She knelt opposite him, voice gentle but firm. "Lily, sweetheart, can you take a deep breath with me?" The child's small chest heaved. Emma placed a hand on her back. In and out. Gradually, Lily's trembling eased. Daniel watched as Emma's calm spread through the room, like the soft echo of her singing bowl. When the fever spiked again, Emma said, "We should get her home." Together they carried her through the storm, Daniel's jacket wrapped around her tiny frame. Back at the penthouse, Emma wiped Lily's forehead while Daniel fetched medicine and towels. They worked in quiet rhythm, like they'd done this 100 times. When Lily finally drifted into sleep, the storm outside began to fade. Daniel leaned against the wall, exhausted. "I shouldn't have said those things to you," he murmured. "You didn't come here because of Julia. You came because you saw us drowning." Emma looked at him, eyes soft but guarded. "I came because I know what drowning feels like." Her voice broke slightly. "That boy I lost at the hospital, he died holding my hand. I thought if I let anyone close again, I'd fail them too." Daniel stepped closer. "You didn't fail him, and you didn't fail us." Lightning flashed across the skyline, and in that brief light, the walls they'd both built seemed transparent. Then a faint sound broke the silence, a whisper so small Daniel almost thought he imagined it. "Don't fight, please." They turned. Lily was awake, her eyes half open, voice fragile but clear. Emma froze, tears filling her eyes. Daniel knelt beside the bed. "We're not fighting, baby," he said softly. "We're right here." She reached for both of their hands, linking them together. The singing bowl sat on the nightstand, the one Emma had left weeks ago. Without a word, Daniel picked up the mallet and struck it gently. The note hummed, pure and steady. Lily smiled weakly. "Pretty sound," she whispered, before drifting back to sleep. Emma exhaled shakily, her fingers still intertwined with his. "She spoke," she whispered. "She finally spoke." Daniel nodded, his throat tight. "Because you came back." She shook her head. "Because you listened." Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle, the city lights gleaming like reflections on water. Daniel realized that life didn't repair itself through grand gestures or control. It healed through presence, through the courage to stay even when things got messy. He looked at Emma, at Lily's sleeping form, and knew. The mistake that had led him into that parenting class was the best wrong turn he'd ever made. Spring arrived softly that year, washing New York in new light. A few months had passed since the storm, the night everything changed, and life at the Carter household had found a new rhythm. Gone was the sterile quiet that once haunted the penthouse. Now mornings began with laughter, burnt toast, and Lily's small voice humming through the halls. She hadn't stopped speaking since that night, though her words came sparingly, like precious pearls. Each syllable still felt like a miracle. Daniel learned not to push, only to listen. He'd traded stock calls for school drop-offs, quarterly reports for bedtime stories. The world hadn't ended. It had just finally begun. Emma came by often, no longer as a therapist, but as part of their lives. She'd helped Daniel transform the study into a creative corner for Lily. Shelves of paints and bells, a small upright piano rescued from a school auction. It wasn't Julia's grand Steinway, but its warm tone filled the home with a gentler kind of music. One Saturday morning, Daniel watched from the kitchen as Lily played the same 3 notes again and again. "She's composing," Emma whispered beside him, "building bridges in sound." He smiled, stirring coffee. "She gets that from her mother." Then, after a pause, he added, "And the courage from you." She looked up at him, startled by the quiet sincerity. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's company announced a new initiative, the Bridge Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting single parents and emotional literacy programs for children. During the press conference, reporters expected another sleek corporate speech. Instead, Daniel stood behind the podium, his daughter holding his hand, Emma in the audience. "I used to believe leadership meant control," he said. "Now I know it means connection. This foundation exists because a mistake led me to the right people, the ones who taught me how to listen." The audience applauded, but Daniel's eyes found only Emma's, shining with tears she didn't bother to hide. That afternoon, they returned to the community center where everything began. Room 204 looked the same. Pastel posters, soft mats, the faint smell of crayons. But now it was filled with fathers as well as mothers, each sitting with their children, learning the same exercises Emma had once taught him. She rang the small brass bell, its clear tone cutting through the chatter. "This sound," she told the group, "reminds us to pause, to breathe, to be present." Daniel caught her gaze, remembering how that same sound had once steadied his trembling hands. Lily sat between them, her little fingers tapping the mallet gently. The note that followed was pure and bright, echoing across the room like a promise kept. Later, as they walked home through Central Park, Lily skipped ahead, her pigtails bouncing. "Daddy, can Miss Emma come for waffles tomorrow?" she asked. Daniel laughed. "You'll have to ask her yourself." Lily turned back, shyly tugging Emma's sleeve. "Please?" Emma crouched to meet her eyes. "Only if you help me make them." The girl nodded solemnly, sealing the deal. Watching them, Daniel felt something ease in his chest, a stillness that wasn't emptiness but peace. That evening, as twilight spilled across the skyline, the three of them sat by the window eating waffles dusted with powdered sugar. Lily brought out a new drawing, a bridge spanning a river, with three figures standing together in the middle. "It's us," she said proudly. "And look, no gaps anymore." Emma traced the lines with her fingertips. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Daniel leaned in. "It's perfect." The small piano sat nearby, bathed in gold light. Emma nudged Lily. "Shall we show Daddy what we've been working on?" The girl nodded and climbed onto the bench. Her hands hovered, then began to play a delicate melody. The one Julia had written years ago. The one Emma had once played to heal her silence. But now it was different, simpler, brighter. Daniel recognized the motif instantly. "Bridge of Light," he whispered. Emma smiled. "Her version. Ours now." When the final note faded, the room was quiet except for the sound of their breathing. Daniel took Emma's hand, his voice low. "I walked into the wrong room that day," he said, "but it gave me the right life." Emma squeezed his fingers gently. "Maybe the universe doesn't make mistakes," she said. "Only bridges." Outside, the city shimmered with evening lights reflected on the river, each one a small reminder that healing, like bridges, is built piece by hands willing to reach across the distance. And as Lily began to hum softly, Daniel realized that love, in its purest form, wasn't something you found. It was something you built, together. He walked into the wrong classroom that day, but walked out with the right life. What began as a mistake became a bridge, between a father and his daughter, between grief and hope, between two hearts brave enough to try again. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, in the form of a small voice saying, "Don't fight, please." If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in second chances. And tell us in the comments, do you believe the universe ever sends you to the wrong place just to lead you home?